It's time for a field trip. While this species may be seen in your urban backyard while traveling from location to location, it is primarily found in the wild prairies of the Midwest. Here to discuss the Regal Fritillary, aka the butterfly of the prairie, is Keith Summerville. After receiving his undergraduate degree in environmental science from Westminster College in Pennsylvania, Keith worked as a field ecologist for the Michigan chapter of the Nature Conservancy before attending Miami University in Ohio for his PhD. Keith is the Levitt Distinguished Professor of Environmental Science and Director of the J. N. Darling Institute for Rural Sustainability at Drake University in Iowa. His teaching interests include restoration ecology, conservation biology, field zoology, and quantitative ecology. His research focuses on developing sustainable management frameworks for forest and prairie systems in both North America and Western Rwanda. He serves as the editor-in-chief for the Journal of the Lepidopterist Society and serves on the governing board for the Iowa Audubon and the Society for Ecological Restoration Midwest and Great Lakes chapter. Welcome, Keith. Thanks for being here today. I'm excited to talk with you about the Regal Fritillary.
Sounds
let's
good.
just start off maybe. Did I pronounce that right?
You did, 100%.
Oh, good. Okay. We can stop the recording now. We're good. No, just kidding. Just kidding. Well, is there a specific reason why you care about the Regal Fritillary?
I've been working as a wildlife biologist now for 25 or 26 years, depending on how you count my time in grad school. Started with an interest in Lepidoptera, butterflies and moths. Moved out here, fell in love with the prairie 22 years ago, and the Regal Fritillary really is a symbol of that ecosystem and highly representative of, what the state and the Midwest, what the state of Iowa and the Midwest would have looked like pre-agricultural development.
That's neat. Yeah, and with this podcast being very focused on the Midwest, I like that symbolism.
It should resonate well.
Yeah. We all know what that open prairie looks like around here. Let's talk about what the Regal Fritillary looks like. What color are they?
When you describe any butterfly, you've got to look at both the upper surface and the undersurface. So the upper surface is orange with some black markings, and then the hind wing is more like a burnt red or a slight brown. The underside is like the ground color, brownish with silver spots. The spots are brighter in the males than they are in the females.
And just to make sure we're understanding correctly, the upper side is like if they have their wings open.
That's right.
That top portion that you see. And the underside is what would be underneath.
Right. That's right.
Differences between male and females?
Subtle, but yeah, the males are smaller. The males are way more active. So if you're going to see them, you're highly likely to see a male. And then right at the end of the hind wing on the upper side, the males have orange spots. The females are more cream.
How big is a Regal Fritillary?
3 to 4 inches wingspan.
What does the caterpillar look like?
They look creepy, depending on your perspective. They're kind of a velvet black caterpillar, but what really stands out for them is lengthwise on the top of the body, they've got orangish red striping, and then their body is covered with spines.
Oh, hard spines, soft spines?
They're more like fleshy spines. They're more for visual, to scare you than they are actually painful or they're not poisonous. But they do present a visual, like a striking visual image.
If someone wants to step outside and spot the Regal Fritillary as a butterfly, where should they look? And is there a specific time of year that they're more likely to see them?
They are found primarily in tallgrass prairie habitats.
So you're not going to see them in town, in like an urban setting?
Moving from habitat to habitat, sure. But in terms of can I get them into my backyard? I think that's probably a risky endeavor to attempt to do because they require quite a bit of space and they require fairly high quality habitat. So just planting their host plants to attract them is actually likely to do them more harm than good, because you're creating an ecological trap that they'll colonize into a habitat that really isn't big enough or high enough quality for them to successfully reproduce and grow their population.
Can you go into that a little bit more of what you mean by they need a large habitat and a very specific quality?
Yeah, there are a handful of species. In the bird world, we might recognize Henslow's sparrow as falling into that category. In the mammal world, Plains pocket mouse. In the butterfly world, Regal Fritillary. Those are species that tend to restrict themselves to very diverse tallgrass prairie habitats with abundant and different species of flowers throughout the summer, so they can feed themselves as adults, but then fairly high quality native violets, which is the host plant that the caterpillar eats. And it's hard to get all of those things packed into a backyard garden that might be, part of a typical neighborhood yard. It's just simply not going to be big enough to accommodate the multiple needs that this species has.
That's really interesting.
Yeah, because the adults eat one food source, the caterpillars eat another, and then they overwinter in, the scientific word is duff, but it would be like the dead grasses and thatch, that's on the ground of a prairie. So they need all three of those things, and to introduce those elements into a typical urban or suburban neighborhood comes with its own set of challenges. And then attracting them into a half-acre backyard probably isn't doing that species very good, because you're only going to get a few of them, and you're pulling away from a larger population. And then, do they have enough host plant to feed the caterpillars? Is there enough diversity of nectar sources that bloom in June, July, and August to feed them? And then are you going to let that vegetation go completely unmanaged from fall through the beginning of the spring? That would require a very particular type of landowner and a very tolerant neighborhood association.
Sure.
It's not that that doesn't exist, but it's not for everybody.
Right. You mentioned the host plant for a fritillary is violet.
Well, violets are considered a spring ephemeral flower. What that means is that they bloom before the vegetation canopy has leafed out, or in a prairie greened up. And then they senesce, the vegetation dies back, and they remain below ground for the other 10 months out of the year. So one of the really unique things about this species is that the adults will fly in the month of June. And some of that, sometimes you get a cool spring, that flight season will extend into mid-July. And most of the breeding happens during that mid-June to mid-July flight window. What Regal fritillaries will do, the females will mate in middle of June to middle of July, and then delay laying those eggs. Those fertilized eggs will hibernate, for lack of a better way of describing it. The technical term's called diapause. So they'll remain undeveloped from the middle of July until early September, and then that female will lay their eggs where she thinks violets will be. The eggs hatch, the caterpillars immediately go into winter diapause, which means they themselves shut down metabolically. Those caterpillars don't start eating until the violets rebloom again next spring.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a pretty complicated, really remarkable phenomenon. There's only a handful of examples in the animal world in the United States where you see that kind of disconnect between when mating happens, when egg laying occurs, and then when the juveniles, the first caterpillars come, break their dormancy and come out and feed. And so the females are laying their eggs on their best guess on where they'll be violets.
I hope they're good at lotteries.
Well, they must be. Scientists haven't really fully figured it out, but the fact that it works, the fact that natural selection found that strategy tells you that those females are using some cue, soil chemistry, microclimate. There's some cue that they're using to figure that out.
How deep are they laying the eggs so they can
Right on the
survive through the
surface of the
cold air?
leaf litter, and then the first hatchling caterpillars will crawl down into it, and they overwinter there.
Okay. Okay. How deep are they going in the winter?
Below the thatch, but not so deep that there's an absence of oxygen.
Okay. So they're still in frozen soil
Yeah, they can be in frozen
over the
soil.
winter.
A lot of insects are either freeze tolerant or will drop their freezing point through some physiological chemistry that allows them to resist freezing.
Sure. So they're tougher than us humans.
Certainly tougher than I am in the winter.
Yeah. Same. Where do they have their cocoon or their chrysalis?
They'll go into that stage in that leaf litter or in that
Okay.
vegetative litter.
So they're not hanging like a typical chrysalis that you're thinking of, or I think
No,
of.
and the caterpillars feed at night, so the caterpillars are really hard to find.
Oh.
The cocoons are hard to find, but that's one of the reasons why, there's concern about those that manage their prairies through widespread use of fire. And that usually happens in the springtime. We tend not to be able to burn in the fall, either because, corn is still dry in the fields and the risk of fire spread is enormous because corn's ungodly flammable when the leaves dry out. And so we do a lot of our burning in the spring when it's a little bit safer and there's more appropriate meteorological conditions. Well, that's when these things are caterpillars. And so if you've got 100 acres and all 100 acres supports regals and you burn it, all 100 acres of it, those caterpillars have no mechanism for dealing with that. So you got to break your prairies into these little parcels and only burn maybe, a quarter or a half of them in one year and the other half in another year. So that you're always retaining refugia for these, kind of vulnerable animals to survive that very natural disturbance.
So caterpillars, the Regal Fritillary, like violets. Do adults have a favorite flower, or do they have like a wider variety?
Now they'll feed on a mixture of prairie flowers, blazing stars, asters, things like that we would associate with that tall grass prairie landscape.
And you mentioned, kind of going back to the life cycle and the reproduction.
Yeah.
The caterpillars overwinter. What happens to the adult butterflies?
So that's the end of the generation. Like once egg laying has occurred, the females will eventually, pass. So
Okay.
the adult stage is about a 3-month, at its longest duration for the whole life cycle.
That's not very long at all.
No, but again, I mean, that's true for most. The word to use is univoltine. So one, voltine, life. So one complete life cycle lasts a year. You got to break those 12 months out. And for a good 3 or 4 months out of every year, it's too cold to do anything. So you're in that winter dormancy. So 3 and 4, like that's 7 months out of the year. So 5-ish month is in the caterpillar stage, maybe less. The adult flight period may be a little longer than just 3 months, but they break up the 12-month calendar pretty effectively. Especially when, there's no flowers in bloom from, November through into April, really.
Right.
Your host plant senesces back in June. So you got to enter the cocoon stage before, the middle of June in order to get your flight period out. Like they really maximize all 12 months out of the year. They just do it in different life stages.
That leads me to my next question is, how do Regal Fritillaries contribute to the broader ecosystem?
The adults are absolutely critical for pollination services. Like they are known to pollinate a number of different tallgrass prairie flowers. The caterpillars are effective at taking carbon and converting that into a different carbon source. So they take carbon in plants, turn it into carbon in their frass. That's their waste. Caterpillars are certainly food for any number of organisms that live in the prairie, insect gleaning, birds or spiders or, other predatory beetles and things that inhabit tall grass prairies.
How is the Regal Fritillary population doing?
Across the country, I think it's considered vulnerable, which means yeah, okay, so it's restricted to this really rare habitat type that's disappeared across the landscape over a century of agriculture development. But it's only vulnerable. Not, it doesn't get any federal protection, statutory protection. It's not on the endangered species list. It's not special concern. It's not threatened. In Iowa, it's a threatened species, although the numbers that I've seen in recent years make me wonder if maybe we should re-examine that and downlist it. It seems to be doing well in Iowa. Regals are endangered in Ohio. I don't think they're listed at all in Nebraska or South Dakota. I think they're in like 86 of 93 counties in Nebraska, and they're in at least 70% of the counties in South Dakota. So it's a mixed picture. I mean, in general, at the federal level, their numbers are fairly consistent year to year. Some states have quite a few of them. Other states, maybe not so much.
Okay. Are there particular factors that are helping that population be good?
I mean, there's greater recognition that we need to manage our grasslands through the proper implementation of disturbances. Like, we can't just leave them alone. We've gotten better at resolving invasive species challenges like Sericea lespedeza or, some of the more invasive grasses that can get into prairies like reed canary. We've done a better job over the years at managing those. People are just more aware in the conservation community of the need to manage that invertebrate base of every food chain. Otherwise, the upper parts of the chain, become very unstable because the food base or the resource base is gone. So in general, I think we've done a better job at adaptively managing our resources.
That is so heartwarming and positive to hear. I feel like so many times in the conservation world and the sustainability world, we hear about these species and we only hear about them declining. And so it's so nice to hear about a species that we've noticed what we need to do. We're making those changes and that population's doing okay now. Obviously, we probably still need to watch what we're doing and, take care of our prairies. But it's great to hear that.
Yeah. On
doing
a
well.
species by species basis, when we want to, we can effectively manage and conserve them. The California condor, the sandhill crane, like there's bear, wolves, like we've got a number of examples where, okay, we can figure this out, but it's going to take time. We're going to make some mistakes, but trust that the process of adaptive management is going to work. And the Regal's another example of that, but it doesn't mean that you can just stop. That success doesn't mean walk away and leave it alone. It's successful because each year we're doing these things to enhance it, the success.
What is one small thing that individuals can do that would support the Regal Fritillaries?
I can think of 3 that would be
Awesome.
easy for just about anyone to do. Many states have stamp programs or other mechanisms where, for a relatively limited amount of money, you can directly contribute to habitat protection. So think the duck stamp at the federal level. Most states have the wetland stamps, and Ohio has a specific stamp that funnels, I think they're $10 each, funnels directly into animal-based wildlife conservation, like for the Regal Fritillary.
Okay.
That's something anybody can do anywhere. In own backyards, maybe drop the use of insecticide application. Know where your food comes from. Agricultural commodities that come from seeds treated with neonicotinoids, which are meant to keep the seeds from being eaten. I get that we need to do that, but the over application of those, like, that is killing insects everywhere. Nicotine in general is a pretty lethal substance for any insect's physiology. And then planting natives, alongside. will benefit, maybe not the Regal directly, but it'll benefit species like the Regal, like for instance, the monarch, which everyone knows, could benefit from just planting common milkweed in your backyard. I do it. I get milk. I'm breeding, monarchs passively. It's not like I'm doing anything. The plants are doing the work, each year. So, those are 3 small things that people can do that will feed into the larger, importance of wildlife conservation.
Anything else that we haven't covered yet about Regal Fritillaries that
just get out and enjoy your prairies. There's a lot more to them than what you see when you drive by them in your car. You've got to walk out, within it, and you will be amazed at the things that you can spot. And there's grasslands all around us in the Midwest. So get out and enjoy.
Well, thank you so much for teaching us a little bit more about our butterfly of the prairie.
Wonderful. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening. If you have questions about flora or fauna species you see in your backyard, please email them to info@ourwildbackyard.org, and it may just be answered on an upcoming episode. Until next time, take care and enjoy nature in your neighborhood.